Hello everybody, this is the grade 12 unit 6A rather, this is unit 6A, and today's topic is melodic harmonization or harmonization of melodies. And so the example that you see on the board here, I've just gone ahead and copied the one from the guide that we're going to be using to illustrate this exercise. And I'll just read through a couple points from your learning guide, and then we'll get to this example. So recalling some things we've done in the past, we just need to remember a couple of details. So triads must be complete with 3 pitches, and the appropriate pitch must be doubled. So when we're harmonizing these melodies, we're only going to be dealing with 3 notes. In some cases, well, again, we'll be seeing 4 notes, but or sorry, 4 voices will be represented, but we'll only be dealing with 3 notes. So obviously, particular pitches, the appropriate ones will need to be doubled. The rules that follow for when we're doubling pitches are, remember, if it's in root position, you're going to double the root or the bass note. When it's in first inversion, if the bass note happens to be a tonal note, in other words, the first, 4th, or 5th note of the scale, you double that. If not, then you're going to find a tonal note and just go ahead and double that one. And then the last thing to remember for doubling is that when a triad is in second inversion, we double the 5th or the bass note. Okay. The other thing we need to remember are our voice ranges. So extending from the bass to the soprano voice, remember these are things to be aware of. So for the bass voice, the low F below staff up to middle C. Tenor and alto voice is appropriate, and then soprano is kind of the upper bookend of that, so extending from middle C to the G above staff. But just have a look in your guide when you're doing this exercise and making sure we're adhering to the correct voices as we go through this. Common tones are maintained in the same voice, and parts may not cross one another. So in other words, the alto must not go higher than the soprano. The other thing we need to be looking at is that there's contrary motion of the upper 3 voices when the chord is moving in a stepwise direction, stepwise motion. Not necessarily when it's moving from like a tonic to a dominant, but certainly if we're going dominant to submediant, as this example illustrates, we want to make sure we're having some contrary motion. The last thing to consider is for avoiding parallel octaves and fifths between any 2 voices. So a perfect fifth to a diminished fifth would not be considered parallel, however. So you can see in your guide the example going from the tonic to the subdominant, the distance from the G to the B, or sorry, to the G to the D rather in the bass clef, and then going to the subdominant, so going from C to G. We've maintained a distance of a fifth between the G and the D, and then moving from that to the C to the G. You can see the distance is a fifth. So that's something we would want to avoid when we're writing this out. So using an inversion for the subdominant triad would be a better way of going about this to avoid that. And then you can also see the upper voices. So going from the low bass voice, the low G, to the G above 2 octaves, and then the same thing. We did the same thing in this example, extending from the C to the C above, middle C, and the treble clef above. So that's an octave maintenance similarity that we want to avoid when we're doing this. So let's have a look at this example. So we've got a melody here, and basically, the way that it's been notated, we can go ahead and we can just assign a voice to the melody, and most of the time we're just going to go ahead and give it the soprano voice. So we've got our melody. Some other things we've got our key signature. So what we need to do, the first thing we need to do is, like always, determine what key we're in when we've been given a key signature and a melody. And so we're going to be looking for a couple of clues. The first one being the starting and ending pitches. Most of the time we're going to be ending on the tonic. And the other thing to look for so that would give us 2 options. Well, based on this key signature, we could either be in B flat major or G minor. They both share the same key signature. And the starting and ending pitches, they were both B flat. So at the moment, it looks like we're looking for a B flat major designation for this. The other thing to rule out a G minor possibility would be any raised accidentals, so 6th or 7th raised, i.e. F sharps, that kind of thing. Now, this particular melody doesn't have an F sharp, so we don't really know for certain if in fact it is in a minor key. However, we've got to make the executive decision. We're going to go B flat major. That's the evidence that we have. So we're just going to go ahead and go with B flat major, starting and ending on a B flat. So we'll go ahead and we'll just label this delegate this. Okay, so B flat major. The next thing we're going to do, and I'm not going to illustrate it with this example, but we're going to write out all of the possible chords or diatonic chords that exist in the key of B flat major. And so there are going to be 7 potential triads that we can be using throughout this melodic example here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of these, and we're just going to, one by one, we'll go through tonic, we'll go to the supertonic, we'll do median, we'll do sub, right? We'll just keep going through the list, and kind of like Jeopardy. Do I have a tonic chord? And then you're going to put, the tonic chord above all of the possible locations where it could go. So we're just going to go ahead and do that. So B flat major, we've established the key. So now we have a reference and we can determine what the triads are going to be. So a B flat major, a tonic triad for B flat major would have the notes B flat, D, and F. So as I go through this melody, anytime I come across a B flat, a D, or an F, I'm just going to associate a tonic triad to that. So starting things off, fairly obvious, we've got a B flat. So that's one possible location we could have a tonic triad. Another B flat. We don't have a B flat, a D, or an F. Neither do we have that here, but we have the B flat here again, so that one could be. That's a C, not a B flat, D, or F. Another C, but that one's another B flat. So those are all the locations where we could have a tonic triad to harmonize with this melody. Okay, so step 1, just go through, and now we're going to go back and we're going to go through this a second time. This time we're going to look for all of the possible locations that a supertonic, or the 2 chord, could be fitting into this mix. So remember, based on the second note of B flat major, so based on the note C, so this one would be C, E flat, or G. So if we have a C or an E flat or a G in any of these locations, we can go ahead and do that. Now I've just noticed I've actually made an error when I transcribed this part out, so I need to fix this. Sorry you guys, I made a mistake on this. I was up a major second when I wrote this out. That should be a G. That should be an A. That should be a B flat. Okay, so now that we've got that corrected, I knew something didn't look like it. Okay, so there we go. So tonic. So this one could also be tonic, right? There's our other B flat located there. Okay. So C, E flat, or G for the 2 chords. So we're going to go through this anytime we come across a C, an E flat, or a G. There's our G. So we could have a possible supertonic triad here. And we don't have an E flat, but we do have a C. So we could also have a supertonic triad in that location as well. Let's go on to the 3, or the mediant rather. So B flat, the mediant note, based on D. So D, F, and A could be that location. So here's an A, so we could have the mediant chord there, and we've got another A here, so we could do it there as well. So my first run through, I'm just going to go through in this melody, and you can see I have one potential triad for each of these notes already indicated here. Well, let's keep going. Let's go to the subdominant. So the subdominant, based on the note E flat, so E flat, G, or B flat rather. So I have a subdominant that I could put here. E flat, G, or B flat could also be here. E flat, G, or B flat. So those are all the locations where we could have a subdominant triad. So you can see there's a couple more possible locations for a primary chord in that spot. And then moving on to the dominant. So based on the note F, F, A, and C, we have an A here. So this could be a dominant. This is a C. This could also be dominant here. Let's keep going. Submediant triad based on the note G. So G, B flat, or D. We've got our B flat, so that's a possible location. We've got it again here. G, B flat, or D. And another one here, B flat, and another one here, B flat. So those are all the locations where we could have a submediant triad. And last but not least, the leading tone based on the 7th degree. Where could that exist? So this would be based on the note A natural, so then we'd have the notes A, C flat, or E. And here's our A. A, fleece, C, sorry, A. E flat or C. In this case, we've got our C. So that's where we can put that one. So there you go. So we've got all of Oops, I skipped over the 3 in this case. So dominant, I forgot to do this one. Dominant there. There we go. It'll all be the same for that one as well. So those are all the locations where we can have those particular given triads. So the next step we're going to do is we're going to go through these, each of these, and we're going to determine, as much as possible, we're going to try to use the primary chords throughout this exercise. But before we do that, we want to look for and decide on what some cadence possibilities might be for this particular example. So at the phrase endings is where we're going to be putting cadences. So you can see in this example, based on the last 2 notes and the sequence of chords I've illustrated here, I can either be doing a cadence, so a cadence ending on the 6th, we know that one to be a deceptive cadence, or a cadence that ends on the tonic, which would be a perfect. So I have 2 possibilities here. I could go perfect, or it could be perfect or deceptive. I know in your guide it says imperfect, but remember imperfect means that you're going from the tonic, or you're going from something to the dominant. This one we're actually going from the dominant to the submedian. We're going to the 6th. So that's a deceptive cadence. That is not an imperfect cadence. And then this one, perfect, obviously could be going from dominant to tonic. So we'll have to keep that in mind as we're going through and writing and arranging this piece, that we're having 2 possibilities that we could be doing for that. So then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back and we're going to fill in the rest of our chord progression using primary chords as much as possible, and then writing the Roman numerals for the chord progression as we go. So from this list of chords here, I'm going to go down here, and this is going to be my final copy for what I've done up here. So primary chords as much as I can. As we go through our primary chords, we're going to be going through, so again, 1, 4, or 5 tonic, subdominant, or dominant. As I move through the sequencing, I'm going to keep going through that same order. So if I come across a tonic chord first, I'm going to use that. Not to say that you would never use this chord or this chord, but we're going to try and simplify this. We need some kind of process by which we can simplify it and kind of get a sense of what direction we're going to take with this. So I'm just going to go ahead and just use that. Now I'm going to use the tonic chord for the first 2 examples. I could go to the subdominant. I do have that option, but I'll just stick tonic for this example. We're going to go to dominant. Following that, we're going to go to the subdominant in this example. Again, I'm just copying what we've got here. We've got some options here. Dominant for this one as well. Looking at these options, I have tonic, or I could go subdominant. We're going to choose to go to the tonic. And then down here, a couple of options, but or basically the main option, again, if we're trying to primary chords, we've got dominant. Now this one we do have the 2 options. We're not going to, although we're not going to go to the subdominant, because we don't have any cadences that end with a subdominant. We certainly have subdominant to tonic. We know that one is plagal, but we don't have that in this example, so we're not going to worry about that one. So that leaves us basically with the tonic, or we could have the submedian. Now you can see down here, we ended up going submedian, and I'm just going to put that in for now. And we're going to go through and see why that actually is the case for this particular example. So once we've got our basics illustrated in here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to write our bass line for our pitches with chord pitches. And we're going to strive for contrary motion to the melody and no parallel fifths or octaves. We've got to remember not to do that. We also want to remember to use first inversions, but not second inversions. This is a nice way of getting around to create good root motion, basically, so that the bass isn't always doing the same thing. If there is a repeated note using the same chord with a first inversion, that's okay. And then notes that are going by step in one direction, we try to write the bass in the reverse direction. And then any other parallels, that's fine too. So we're going to, so contrary motion, again, notes going by stepwise in direction contrary to what your melody is doing. So we're going to do that with this right now. So I'm going to go ahead now. I'm going to also do my stems the way they need to go, because eventually we're going to fill this all in with the inner voices. So I know in your guide it's got, you know, stem direction isn't really a thing right now. The MuseScore program would have defaulted that. But so anyway, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that as we go. So now you can see in this example, we've gone from a low B flat tonic, that's fine to establish that chord. This one also has the B flat in it. However, you'll notice that this one we've gone to first inversion. Why did we do that? Well, if we look at our melody, it's a repetition of these two notes. And there isn't any directional indication. If we were ascending with this melodic line at this particular note, we would want our bass line to go descending. But because it's not actually moving, we can actually go up or we can go down with this bass line. For the sake of this argument, we're just going to move up. So actually the third of that chord, the tonic chord, B flat, D, and F, remember? So the D is actually in the bass this time. So we need to make sure that we indicate that it's in first inversion with that particular chord. The next chord we are going to the dominant chord. Now if you look at the melody, we've gone from B flat, we're going down to an A in this direction. So that means we want to take this and we want to bring the F, we're going to go up. That's convenient for that purpose. So there's our contrary motion, okay? So when you're dealing with soprano and bass voices, that's where you're kind of really establishing the overall architecture of what's going to be taking place here. So making sure that you've got that contrary motion taking place. Now in the next example, this going from the A down to the G, we can go in this case, we're going to go from that F. This is still just a second, and that's okay to bring that down. And then we're going to go up to an F here, and then we're going to go down to a D here. Again, some similarity. It doesn't always have to be contrasting all the time, but it's not a bad thing if it's on occasion not doing that. But in this case, right, we're going up here, so we're going to descend with this idea. We're still carrying up this idea of going up to the C. We're going to go down to the F here, and then we're going down to the G, or sorry, down to the B here, which means we're going to bring this up to the G here. Okay, so you can see some of what's taking place in terms of contrary motion, but also just highlighting just the bass and soprano. So now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to fill in the inner voices using the correct doubling rules. And we're going to avoid parallel octaves and fifths. So we're going to watch doubling rules and we're going to watch parallels as well as we go through this. Okay. So you can see basically what we've been doing with this so far is something to note, and we haven't mentioned this yet, but as we go through this, you got to get used to the fact that your final, or as you're going through these sequencing, similar to how we were kind of deciding on the cadence endings here, you have to be prepared to potentially redo your work, or try different possibility combinations, because you might find yourself getting caught in a situation where it's really challenging to resolve a particular situation. It might be easier in that case to use a secondary voice, or secondary chord rather. But let's just go through the rest of what we got in the guide. So watch doubling rules, watch your parallels. Doubled fifths can help with voice leading in some cases, but never double the leading notes. So let's have a look at this example that we've got so far. So we noticed how we were descending both of these chords. So if we look at this comparison, if you skip it, says, notice the dominant to the subdominant, the harmony is created both parallel fifths and octaves. And this is a case where a secondary chord can help you avoid the parallels. And so that's going from basically by changing the 4 chord to a 6 chord, what we end up doing is the voice leading parallels are no longer a problem. Okay, which is what we're finding with this particular chord right here. Okay, so we've gone down. In this case, the melody is descending, and so that means we want to create some contrary motion with that voice. And so what we're actually going to do is we're going to substitute this 4 chord. We're going to pull that one out. We're going to go to the submediant, which means instead of the note E, we're going to bring this up a third to the note G. What that's done is now we've got the contrary motion that's going to help us out to solve that situation. The melody goes up to the next line, which again, now we've got our contrary motion going down from this G down to this F. So now you can see that we've got this almost symmetrical kind of image or pattern that's taking place with our voicing. So that substituting a secondary chord totally took care of that situation. Often solutions are only a change away, so don't just dump everything out and redo it. Right? We've simplified that. We were stuck with that situation. We just went back and put in a secondary chord in that case, and we are fine. Okay? So now we're going to go ahead and let's fill in the rest of our voices and determine if there's any situations where, again, now, I forgot to do this a little earlier, but because we are going down, there's the third of the tonic again, so that is again in first inversion. So we're going to go ahead now and we're going to fill in all of the inner voices for this example and watching it over. So we've got our root, there's our third, our D. We've got another B flat, which means we should have an F in here somewhere, and we're going to go ahead and put our F here. That's fine as our alto voice. So now it's starting to take shape a little bit. There's our root. Okay, we ascend it, we're going to bring this voice down. This one comes up, we can bring this one down. The F, similar how it did in the melody, we can just maintain that same position, that same pitch. That's fine. What follows this is we're going to go to the next note. So we're going to the dominant chord. So based on the note F, fill in our upper voices. So there's our C, there's our fifth, there's the A, there's the third, and we're going to double the root in a dominant chord. That's the note that gets doubled. So there we go, or in root position rather. So we're doubling that. So we'll just go ahead and we'll keep filling in the rest of these voices. We go to G. So here's our B flat. This is the submediant. Remember, so that's the root. There is the third. And then we're going to have our fifth here. And again, the root in this case is going to get doubled with that voice as well. Going on to our next chord, here's the note F. The dominant, again, F, so that's the note that gets doubled. There's our third, which means that we need to have our fifth. And there it is here. So again, ascending, descending, we've got some contrary motion taking place. These ones are moving up, that's fine. Upper voices can move up. It's still in contrast to what's taking place. Because this one's going down, again, these voices can be going up, and this one's coming down. And then we come to D. Remember, that's the third of the tonic, and that's in first inversion. So there is the root for that. And then we've got our fifth here, and then we're doubling that root. Up here is the B flat as well, but again, first inversion. So still contrary motion. This line isn't really changing. This one's coming down. But that's okay in that particular instance. And then we go, so here's our A, and there's our F for the dominant. And then you can see, so we determined that we're going to be ending things on the submediant, as in a deceptive cadence. And then there's our the end. So again, contrary motion, right? Upper voices are moving contradictory to what the bass voice is on its way up. So this happened to be in a major key, but if we were in a minor key, remember that we always want to raise the leading note, and that's going to get an accidental. Okay? In general, we want to always try for close, smooth voice leading. So things aren't, there's not any huge contrast. Things have a logical or a sequence that kind of makes sense as you're looking through these, and if you were to be playing these. No parallel fifths or octaves, so double check at the end that you haven't done that. And again, if it was in, right, like we had that situation earlier, had we gone up or down rather, we would have created that parallel motion which we wanted to avoid. So a secondary chord in that situation worked out well. We were not having to concern ourselves with that in that particular spot. Whoops. Don't use second inversions or non-chord notes. Leading note should rise to the tonic, but never double the leading note. And then last, always use the 7 or the leading note chord in a first inversion. So that is basically it for this unit. So we'll go ahead and tidy this up. So now we know that we've decided to go deceptive on this. As our sequencing course. Again, that allowed us, because if we'd gone to the tonic, I mean, we could have, but it would have given us some challenges in the way that we had arranged this initially with our voice leading, just based on how we assigned the root in that particular spot. We want to have that contrary motion taking place. and so this was just a solution that took care of some of those things. We've got our contrast, our contrary motion, so we've gone ahead and taken care of it. It was a simple thing to do with that submeaning chord. It's kind of like, it's just like, you're kind of, your lucky card, so to speak, right? So that's it, everybody. So you can harmonize the following melodies with your in your learning guide, those Bach chorales. Submit 2 examples through the course Dropbox into D2L. These take some time, right? That example took a chunk of time, but again, it's it's like a first draft, right? You just go through the sequence of steps, and just be prepared. Even though once you've started, you've kind of settled on what you'd like to have down here in terms of your sequence of chords. Be prepared to even change it at that point as well, because you might come across, again, this situation where we couldn't really show our contrary motion, but then an easy solution was just to use a secondary chord and do a substitution to take care of that situation. So have patience when you're doing this. It takes some time to go through these, and you'll get an appreciation for everything that, a lot of, especially what Bach was doing way back. And again, this is where a lot of this is basically all he, constructed, all of these rules and practices when we're doing our classical harmony. So you get a real good sense of an appreciation for, music that was written to have interest, not just, and variety, and it creates the nuance. It creates, allows for different types of expression, and it just creates a more engaging piece of music, basically, at the end of the day for the listener. And it's good practice for keyboard players, because again, all of the harmony we're doing is all based on the use of the keyboard and surrounding that instrument. So thanks, everybody. We will see you soon for our last theory lesson, which will be 6B.